Dan Perry, who has been on with us before with his perspective. It's good to see you again, Dan. I'll begin with the breaking news that Robert told us about, is that the IDF has confirmed moments ago, yes, it hit an ambulance because the ambulance was being used by Hamas. Your thoughts on this type of news coming out and this tactic being, something that's been out there in the past?
Connell, we're looking at a very extreme case of cynicism almost in Israel about what Hamas is capable of in Gaza. They're frankly not interested in what's called an ambulance and what's called something else. They are assuming that Hamas is going to use human shields in every way conceivable. The use of an ambulance to ferry around potential legitimate military targets is nothing that would shock Israel. It's something that the Hamas is clearly capable of and has done in the past. It obviously contains within it great dangers because there are legitimate ambulances in the world. And so the Israelis obviously might make a mistake. It's part and parcel of what is fundamentally a catastrophic situation.
Now, as I said to Robert, the big picture question coming into today was whether there would be any kind of a pause. The United States has been, it seems, pushing hard for what they call a humanitarian pause, and the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, in the region talking about that earlier today. Here's Secretary of State Blinken. Let's take a listen.
We see this as a way of further facilitating the ability to get assistance in, to make sure that the resources are in place as well to absorb the assistance coming in, to make sure that it gets to the people who need it. We see it as a way also, and very importantly, of creating a better environment in which hostages can be released.
But the issue, Dan, is that Benjamin Netanyahu says he won't pause unless the hostages are released. Your thoughts?
Look, as in every war, I wouldn't pay too much attention to what people say publicly. And of course, there's posturing, and in the end, who knows what they're actually going to do. The fact is, though, the mindset in Israel right now is one in which there is absolutely no credibility placed on the other side as being a good faith player. This is not a regular war between normative players on a world stage. Israel views itself as being forced into a war to the finish against a terrorist group that has as hostages not only the 250-odd people they kidnapped in Israel, but also the 2.3 million people of Gaza. And I've heard a lot of criticism of Israel. I share much of it myself. I've been the source of a lot of it myself. But what I haven't heard is a lot of brilliant advice to the Israelis about what they can do better. There is truly a difficult fight here. And unlike in previous mini wars between Israel and Hamas, where there was a viable endgame in which pretty much in every case, Israel hammered Gaza targets of Hamas until Hamas agreed to stop firing rockets. Right now, they're pretty close to is nothing Hamas can actually agree to. Israel has determined to remove them from power because the level of atrocity that occurred on October 7th is simply not anything they're willing to risk having happen again.
And to that point, I think the last time you and I spoke, we were debating whether there would be a ground invasion or talking about it before it actually took place. And now it's clearly underway and intensifying, by the hour, the way we keep covering it every night. I want to go back to something that you wrote in an op-ed that appeared in Newsweek about the ground assault being a gift, as you said, to Hamas and to Iran. The quote from that: for Israel to topple Hamas by means of a ground invasion of Gaza would probably result in more casualties on the Israeli side than October 7th itself. Hamas had 16 years to prepare for this moment. They can be trusted to have booby-trapped whatever is left. Now it's happening. How do you feel?
Look, that was written a few weeks ago when the basic idea was that they need not blunder in there, as Hamas obviously invited them to do. What they appear to be doing is a longer-term game in which they actually haven't. Note that it's been a month since the actual massacre, and Israel has not yet done the very thing I warned it against doing, which is moving into Gaza City with troops. They're still on the outskirts of it, and they're evidently pursuing a tactic that is more piecemeal, rather cautious, and as a consequence, they haven't, in fact, taken action that would lead to thousands of Israeli casualties and probably tens of thousands of civilian casualties. They're being a little bit careful and piecemeal. And I actually think, to a degree, that is because of the moderate forces they brought into the government. Will they eventually move into Gaza City and take it over is an open question. And I have to assess that currently they probably will.
How does that affect the fears people have of a broader conflict? The leader of Hezbollah, as I mentioned at the top today, did finally come out and say something. Now, as I said, it wasn't an all-out war on Israel declared, but certainly the comments weren't positive for the United States, Israel, or anybody else, as you would expect. So how do you view the fear of widening the conflict if you do move in aggressively and occupy Gaza City and the entire, well, and a lot of the Strip?
It still exists, of course, but what happened today was actually what passes for good news in this region, because Hassan Nasrallah, while he didn't exactly praise the U.S. or Israel, stopped well short of declaring that Hezbollah would join the fray. And the fear had been, as you alluded, Connell, that when Hamas carried out the extreme action that they did, they knew Israel would come after them in Gaza, and they anticipated that it would become a regional conflict with Iran's other proxy movement, Hezbollah in Lebanon, joining in. That was the fear. The nightmare scenario of a total regional conflagration includes the U.S. Then potentially taking action against Iran, and who knows what that would lead to. What we saw today, to a degree, suggests something positive, which is that Hezbollah was itself surprised by what happened, and that they are currently holding fire.
Well, listen, you've covered it for a long time and been there analyzing that region for a long time. So if you say it passes for good news in the region, we'll take it, I suppose. Thank you, Dan.
All things are relative, Connell.
Exactly. Exactly. Not an endorsement, but it passes for good news on a day like this. Dan Perry, live from Tel Aviv with us today. Now,